Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, today saw emerging market stocks heading north towards their biggest weekly gain in nearly 6 weeks. And that's as Asian equities advanced today. Now, sentiment on global markets have lifted on hopes that the US and China will soon resolve that trade dispute. And that's why we saw South Africa's JSE All Share climbing over 1% today. Banks added 1.59% and financials were up 1.02%. That was enough to overcome weakness in some materials companies such as Gold Fields. Now, also coming up on the show today. A British court grants P&ID the right to seize Nigerian assets anywhere in the world over a trade dispute. And a look at Tanzania as we sample some of Africa's stunning architecture. And the entrepreneur in Nigeria who's introduced a new flavor to traditional akara and moi moi. Well, let's start off in East Africa. Tensions are still high at the Uganda-Rwanda border, where a trade dispute has been playing out for the past few months. Now, restrictions on the movement of people and goods has been hampering business on both sides of the border. All this comes a week after the leaders of the two countries signed a peace treaty in Angola. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reporting from Western Uganda.
Preparing to market her merchandise, Fiona Mumpire deals in building materials. But it's not business as usual here.
Before they closed the border, we used to sell our goods to Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But now we are not selling anything.
And she's not alone. Other businesses are also struggling.
People from abroad are the ones who used to come for our things. They could take things, they sell, after selling, they come for others, bringing that in, when they are bringing that money. And now we are here, even the things which they took there, they are still there with money. We don't have money, we don't have, everything is worse here.
Business here at the Katuna border post is on the low ebb, even after the two leaders signed the peace accord in Angola to ease trade. Traders here are worried that the current standoff could edge them out of business. Some businesses have already closed shop, and this border post has been temporarily closed for 6 months. Cargo trucks are being diverted to Mirama and Chanika entry points. Local leaders are now urging the two presidents to enforce the agreement.
We need these borders opened as early as yesterday. Our appeal is that we appeal upon the two parties to engage once again and see that business comes back to normal.
They also want them to set a clear time frame when the borders will be officially opened. In the hope, this will restore the lifeline of many businesses that are on the verge of collapsing. Hilary Ayesiga, Kabale, Western Uganda.
Well, let's move on now. A British court has granted energy firm Process and Industrial Developments the right to attempt to seize $9 billion worth of assets from the Nigerian government anywhere in the world. Now, the verdict was given following the halting of the 2010 gas project in Nigeria's city of Calabar. Now, the decision has been considered a threat to the country, with real estate, bank accounts, and any kind of movable wealth being at risk. However, the company has to prove the property is unrelated to Nigeria's operations as a sovereign state. The ruling converts the arbitration award to a judgment, giving it the same powers across the European Union as a court ruling. Well, let's get an update on that situation. We're joined by Deji Badmus in Lagos. Deji, great to have you on the show. Now, Nigeria's federal government, specifically the Minister of Information, he now seems to be backing down on his earlier assertions that, of course, a takeover of Nigeria's assets was out of the question. They're now saying that they're willing to negotiate with this company. Give us a sense of the latest coming out of Aso Rock.
Well, Uche, what I would say is that it's not as if the government is backing down from its earlier assertion that a takeover is not imminent. What the government is actually trying to do is, trying to, explore two ways to deal with this. Explore the legal option, and then the other option, which is negotiation now with P&ID. Basically, that's what the government has come out to say, that it is willing to negotiate if it comes to that. It's not as if it said, it's not as if the government has said it's still not going to appeal against this case. What the government has said before now, when those ministers actually held that press briefing, was that they're going to appeal. First is that they're going to appeal, file for a stay of execution so that the order is not executed. Remember, even though the judge has given a judgment, the judge has still not given the go-ahead for the execution of the order. So that's the reason why we have to wait until September when he resumes, and then he will make a final pronouncement. So that buys Nigeria some time, and that is the reason why the government is saying it is willing to negotiate, and at the same time file for a stay of execution while filing for an appeal. So it's still the same position. The government has maintained that it is willing to negotiate, but it's quite unfortunate because the government had the opportunity before now actually to negotiate. There was actually a negotiation in the past with the previous government. It's just that this government came in and just didn't honor that negotiation. Now it says it is willing to negotiate, but the way things are going, either way you look at it, Nigeria is going to lose money in this.
And the amount awarded was about $9 billion, as we mentioned. That amounts to about 20% of Nigeria's foreign reserves. Now, of course, experts, as we mentioned, are saying they can target Nigeria's real estate, its bank accounts, or any kind of movable wealth, even oil cargoes. What are the possible Nigerian assets that could be seized in light of this judgment? And can the government, Nigeria's government, really afford to pay off that amount?
Let me start with the last question. Can the Nigerian government afford to pay? I really doubt it. I mean, Uche, you know what the state of the economy is. You know how very badly the Nigerian government needs funds as we speak. And if we're talking about 20% of the country's foreign reserve and you just let it go like that, it's going to be very difficult for the government to recover. I mean, the economy to recover from that kind of shock. So if you ask me, I don't think the government can afford to pay that amount of money. And that's the reason why it is doing everything to possibly negotiate or get the court now to reverse the judgment, so to speak. Now, in terms of what assets now, well, there are quite a number of assets that could be targeted. But of course, you know, as we've been told, the assets must be commercial assets and not assets now of, assets that are not commercially based, so to speak. So they could target, for instance, whatever the country makes from, say, the sale of crude oil. Remember what happened to Chad some time ago when the proceeds from this, its proceeds now from the sale of crude oil was actually, a judge actually ruled that that was a commercial, that money can actually be seized, and it was eventually seized. There are quite a number of, of course, you've talked about Nigeria's cargo ship. We know that the NNPC has quite a number. You could also look at, say, for instance, the NLNG, it has a massive cargo that could also be targeted. So, there are quite a number of assets that could be targeted that are, commercial assets, so to speak. But, everyone hopes it wouldn't come to that, and that somehow both sides will find some kind of middle ground to this and, try to resolve it and then move on. But as I said earlier, I do not see how Nigeria is going to get away from this without spending a dime.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're keeping tabs on that story. Many thanks for that update, Deji. Of course, that's Deji Badmus joining us there in Lagos. Now, let's stay in Nigeria. MTN has officially launched a mobile money service in the country, which is dubbed Momo. Nigeria, of course, is the telecom's biggest market and Africa's most populous nation. Now, mobile money schemes across Africa are seen as a key measure to bridging financial inclusion. One of MTN's biggest and successful Momo operations in West Africa is in Ghana. Take a look.
Nigeria's biggest telecoms firm, MTN, has launched a mobile money transfer service. The new product targets those without bank accounts as the firm works on its plans to become a payment services bank once it obtains approval from the central bank.
For a country the size of Nigeria, we need an estimated 500,000 agents for us to effectively distribute financial services. And we all know, if we look around our country today, that that's a far-fetched number. And so part of what the main thrust of Momo Agent Service is to roll out a pervasive agent network that would at least ensure that we bring financial services to your neighborhood.
The success of Kenya's M-Pesa by Safaricom in East Africa has convinced investors and the industry that financial services are the next growth area for the telecom sector. This as prices for basic services continue to fall in the industry. Nigeria said last year it would allow telecom companies to provide banking services, aiming to give millions of Nigerians without bank accounts access to mobile money services.
The big problem why people don't have access to financial services is a problem of reach, right? It's not the financial services itself, but the big problem is that you have to solve the problem of reach and ensure that you can distribute and extend financial services to the last mile. What Momo Agent Service will do for those customers is that once you have an agent within 5 minutes of your neighborhood, you can have access to this rich bouquet of financial services that exist today.
MTN Nigeria was awarded a license by Nigeria's central bank in July to provide financial services. Majority owned by South Africa's MTN Group, the company runs Nigeria's biggest mobile phone network, serving around 56 million people. More than half of Nigeria's population of 180 million do not have a bank account. MTN Group appointed Rob Shutter as chief executive in 2016 to oversee the formulation of a new strategic growth plan and look for new revenue streams as competition and regulation hit profit margins. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, let's head to South Africa now, where one of the country's top mobile network operators, Cell C, is facing quite a number of challenges. It has defaulted on interest payments, and that default triggered a downgrade by S&P Global Ratings in mid-August. Now, Cell C failed to pay a $14 million interest bill that was due in July. The ratings agency says that they don't expect the company to make the payments within the 30-day grace period, which it was given. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with an update.
The big challenge facing Cell C was that there wasn't enough action taken on the competition and regulatory aspects when the challenger network entered the actual market, especially on mobile termination rates.
It was quite apparent that those were set extremely high to begin with, hobbled them, and dropping those termination rates saw an outbreak of massive price competition that consumers had benefited from. But that entrenched first move advantage of your MTN and Vodacom has meant they're able to reinvest and keep a lead that has put pressure on the challenger networks.
There's been a regulatory failure, which has precipitated market failures. So it doesn't matter, which other third player is going to come in, how deep their pockets are. If we do not fix the regulatory environment, they are going to collapse.
It's a tough business environment and disposable income is being squeezed, so consumers will look for the best deals, which places pressure on market participants.
One doesn't want to see large firms fail. What the consequences are, can be significant, but it can just be that shareholders maybe take a haircut and someone carries on that firm. We'll have to see.
The competition authorities have been working hard, making recommendations to operators to bring down the cost of data in South Africa, and that could place even more pressure on Cell C. But the consumer comes first.
A lot of those interventions are aimed at wholesale regulation or wholesale fixing of practices that might, in a sense, give challenger networks a leg up, because you need means to overcome that first mover advantage and entrenched position. So I think if there's a lesson from it, we should have been acting sooner with more clarity right from the very beginning.
I think we need agile regulators to tackle these problems. It's going to be even tougher in the current digital markets, because markets are going to evolve even much faster. So if regulators are not agile enough, we are going to always be left behind.
While the data inquiry is at an end and the recommendations are being implemented, the competition authorities are scratching their heads about whether they could have done things differently. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
quick look at some of our other corporate headlines for the day. The first half, a pre-tax profit of Rwanda's biggest lender, Bank of Kigali, fell about 3% to $24 million, and that's due to a rise in non-performing loans. Now, the lender's ratio of non-performing loans increased to 6.4% in June, compared to 5.8% during the same period last year. And Botswana's Shumba Energy, in partnership with two Chinese companies, has formed a joint venture to build a coal-to-liquids plant estimated at $2 billion. The plant is expected to produce about 20,000 barrels per day of diesel and 5,000 barrels of gasoline per day when it is completed. Botswana currently imports 1.2 billion litres per annum, despite its abundant coal reserves of around 212 billion tonnes. And South African retailer Woolworths has reported a 2.1% drop in annual earnings. However, it has witnessed a turnaround in its fashion, beauty and home business that had weighed on its sales. Now, the drop is attributed to its mistakes in the local fashion business, especially in women's wear, where product choices in clothing were considered poor. However, sales in fashion, beauty and home business rose by 1.5%. Meanwhile, U.S. apparent company of apparel and shoe brands Timberland, Vans and The North Face will no longer buy Brazilian leather. The VF Corporation announced the halt following the surging forest fires in the Amazon that have raised questions on how companies are contributing to the destruction of the world's largest rainforest. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come. South Sudan moves to address environmental concerns in oil-producing areas. And a look at Tanzania as we sample some of Africa's stunning architecture.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Now, South Sudan's government says it's working to address environmental concerns in oil-producing areas. The country's petroleum minister has announced plans to send a team of environmental experts to assess the scale of damage caused by pollution in oil fields. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet reporting.
Wastewater is not treated and drilling chemicals are frequently disposed of in unprotected areas. Around 80% of South Sudan's oil is produced in the northern Ruweng state, and although oil production brings the country economic benefits, residents are worried about the environmental impact.
There are some diseases here that we are seeing, a generation of young people born with defects. Some are born normal, but within 2 to 3 years they develop complications, and now we have formed a committee to find out the best way to handle this situation.
Communities living in oil-producing areas say pollution has worsened since the start of the civil war in 2013. Both humans and livestock are affected. South Sudan's government now says an environmental audit will begin in early September.
This report will help us and it will guide us, whether these are related to environment or whether they are related to other things. And this will come as a report, and we are going to use this report actually for us to even use, to use the recommendations that we'll find there, even to address some of the environmental concerns.
South Sudan's government insists it is working to address the situation, but the country's environmental regulations are weak and authorities struggle to implement them. 98% of South Sudan's budget comes from oil, and while the government says it is trying to improve environmental standards in the country, holding oil companies to account is proving to be an uphill task. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And to Ghana now, the country's banking sector has been incorporating digitization in its financial service sector. Now, several banks are using mobile phone applications to target more customers and market the services they offer. The country is working towards achieving a cashless economy in the next 10 years in order to better its economy. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Interface you'd see right when you log into the app.
The digital revolution is catching on, and banking in Ghana will soon be all about the mobile phone for rural and urban, business and personal banking needs.
The mobile phone has presented a greater opportunity for everyone to be part of the financial drive. That is where we see a major avenue. So it comes with a lot of work to continue deploying solutions at the mobile level and online.
Ghana's government hopes to achieve a cashless economy by 2030, and banks have a crucial role to play. At this digital banking summit, financial experts, mobile app developers and bank managers are discussing how technology can help improve the way they deliver service to customers.
There's a lot of technology available. Basically, it's a platform play where banks will have products, there'll be intermediaries that deliver those products across the channels, and people use their phone. I mean, I always use the line, where there's a phone, there's a bank. So that phone, whether it's a smartphone or a feature phone, is the center of the relationship with the financial sector.
Joseph Yendok of Asian technology company UTAP is at this summit to introduce its electronic payment solutions to Ghanaian banks. The technology allows small business owners with a phone the ability to send and receive money.
With this device, the agent can help customers who cannot onboard themselves. You can take all the KYC documents you have, and you can see it has a camera at the back. So you can take pictures of ID cards and any other relevant document that the bank needs. So you can do that for them. And with this also, you can do the basic banking transactions for customers.
Technology will also mean fewer people coming into banks to deposit or withdraw money, cutting down banking costs. Many banks in Ghana are working towards adopting new innovations to make banking easier. But to compete effectively amongst themselves means delivering diverse services to help customers make smart decisions. Most Ghanaians are still banking the old-fashioned way, but with over 32 million mobile money accounts already operating, experts say with government support, Ghana may well achieve its goal of a cashless society by 2030. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Now, a deal between Tunisian company Stafim and PSA Peugeot Group is yielding fruits after it was finalized in November 2016. The agreement on the manufacture, assembly and marketing of Peugeot pickup in the country is already producing and exporting vehicles. CGTN's Adnan Shaushi has the details on how the deal will help boost the Tunisian industrial sector.
The Ministry of Trade in Tunisia announced that French automaker Peugeot and its main partner, the Tunisia Pickup Assembly, have exported 67 vehicles out of a total of 200 vans to Côte d'Ivoire.
This is the first but not the last export operation to Africa. It paves the way for considerable investment in the auto industry. Tunisian competences, and their foreign partners guarantee the quality of the exported pickups.
The general manager of Peugeot car manufacturer Jean-Philippe Imparato announced in 2017 the resumption in Tunisia of the marketing of Peugeot pickup 404 after 25 years of absence to meet a growing demand for these vehicles. This assembly line is located in the Nemrira industrial zone in the suburbs of the capital city Tunis.
The unit was inaugurated on July the 25th, 2018. Since then, we've started the production of the Peugeot pickup in 4x2 and 4x4 models for the Tunisian market. Then we've targeted the African market.
The assembly line produces 6 vehicles per day. It will reach 8 vehicles in September. The objective is to assemble 12 pickups per day in December. Many of the spare parts used here are imported from China.
We're importing kits from China and storing the equipment of 36 vehicles in each store. We're also supplying spare parts locally, like the battery, shock absorbers, and leaf springs. The integration level is 43%.
The pickup production unit will produce 3,500 vans destined for the Tunisian, Maghreb and African markets, with an estimated capacity of 400 jobs. Tunisia aims to become a North African hub for the export of cars and spare parts to the rest of the continent. Authorities say the investment, incentives, code grants many advantages to foreign and local investors in the auto industry sector. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, an industrial drive in Tanzania has led to significant infrastructure growth as new buildings are mushrooming around the country every month. However, none showcases this more than the commercial capital city of Dar es Salaam. Now, in 2016, the architects and quantity surveyors named the NMB Bank head office the best building in the country. And CGTN's Daniel Kijo shows us why.
The number of high-rise modern buildings can sometimes reflect a nation's level of development. In the bustling city center, this building owned by NMB Bank has become one of Dar es Salaam's notable sites. The man who designed it has worked in Tanzania for 23 years.
We wanted to present an eye-catching and modern building which projected the right image for the bank.
7 floors of open offices and sleek finishing topped with a colorful ceramic outer layer. The building houses over 600 employees, and the design had to have 2 levels of basement parking.
While people walking by might admire this building on the outside, it's really the design on the inside which is innovative. In the middle of a hot and humid city, this interior offers an open setup which is well ventilated, and it provides a cool environment for those working here.
Architects like Oswald Modu say there is a considerable change in how buildings are currently designed and built in Tanzania. He says in the past, design was influenced by climate as well as budget.
This used to be our design element, aesthetical design elements. We'll go for sun shading for that matter and use it as an element.
Dar es Salaam's tropical climate is an important aspect for modern architects to consider, which is often trumped by other concerns.
If you look at new buildings either built recently or still under construction here in Dar es Salaam, they tend to be glass, which is to say from an aesthetic point of view I find quite uninteresting, and from a climatic and building energy use point of view is normally disastrous.
As more buildings rise in a growing city, many factors now have to be considered, from aesthetics to climate to environmental impact. So now the challenge for architects is to create modern structures in Tanzania that work for the environment as well as their occupants. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, still coming up on the show. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has a way to get Brexit done. And the Shanghai municipal government announces preferential policies for its free trade zone as China attracts more foreign investors.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Just about 5:30, let's recap today's top headlines. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expressing fears of an eruption of what he terms as a full civil war in Libya if nothing is done to end the violence. He has also called on the international community to help in finding a lasting political solution to the impasse. Now, over 1,000 people have been killed so far and hundreds of thousands of others displaced since Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive to take over Tripoli. And a 9-year-old girl who was confirmed to have Ebola in western Uganda has died. The country's Ministry of Health confirmed the death. She had traveled with her mother from the DRC but was found to have symptoms of Ebola as she crossed the border. And African delegates have made recommendations on what they want discussed during the UN Climate Change Summit in September. Now, they want African-centered solutions to curb the increasing effects of climate change. They have been meeting in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, in a forum which was organized by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And finally, Zimbabwe's parliament is considering repealing a law that criminalizes willful transmission of HIV/AIDS, citing a lack of scientific evidence to prosecute cases. Amongst other things, it criminalizes those who are breastfeeding despite attempts in trying to prevent infection. And that's a look at our top headlines. Now, on the international front, British lawmakers who are seeking to block a no-deal Brexit are now making it more likely that Britain leaves the European Union without a deal. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has pledged that Britain will leave the EU on October 31st with or without a deal. Now, he also adds that keeping a no-deal Brexit on the table strengthens Britain's hand in seeking a new deal with the bloc.
I think you'll agree in the last couple of weeks, there's been a great deal of movement from the EU side. They do think that the UK is serious, as indeed we are, about doing a deal. They also understand the parameters of what needs to be done. The current withdrawal agreement just doesn't work for the UK. It's been thrown out 3 times. It keeps us locked into EU law. It makes it impossible for us to run our own trade policy. It means basically that the UK could continue to be, as it were, bossed around by Brussels with no comeback, with no say. That can't work. That can't work for the UK. So we need to come out of that arrangement. They understand that, and we're working together now on serious ways in which we can change the current agreement, get out of that mistake and do a deal. And that's what we're working on now.
Now, as the uncertainty grows, the future of many Brits who are caught up in the bloc still remains unclear. In an attempt to now ease that tension, the German government has taken necessary steps to protect British nationals who are working in the country. But in a no-deal scenario, with all their rights still be guaranteed, well, CGTN's Guy Henderson finds out.
Kittles of Hamburg, a purveyor of all things quintessentially British. Lots of my customers love that lemon curd on their scones.
Almost everything in this shop's imported from the UK, says Alex Kittle, the owner. That means trade delays caused by a no-deal Brexit could hit business hard.
So that will be something that is fresh and
yes.
therefore hard.
That would be more difficult to get in the event of a hard Brexit.
Because it'll go off.
Kittle says it's hard to plan.
We expect that there will be delays in transportation and the cost for transportation will increase. But other than that, we're not quite sure which guidelines to follow.
In the village of Brunsmark outside Hamburg, Ian McNabb's plans are also in limbo.
So this is a relatively new building.
McNabb is Germany's only British mayor, a job only available to EU citizens. He's still unsure when he's supposed to step down.
You get an official letter. I got this official letter, I think, about January. It says when Brexit comes, then no matter what the date is, then you're no longer eligible to be voluntary, the German word is Beamter, like a civil servant.
The right to remain at all is still worrying British expatriates too, despite repeated official assurances that everyone can stay.
We don't know then if that means 6 months, you know, you're okay, and then after 6 months you're not okay. Like it's very hard to say. And if you're long-term unemployed or if you're a pensioner on not a lot of money, then it's all a little bit scary at the moment.
Regional authorities say they've done what they can.
Well, Hamburg is well prepared for a Brexit, either it's a deal or a no-deal scenario. We informed the British citizens living in Hamburg what happens, what they have to do if they want to stay in Hamburg. We informed the companies in Hamburg doing business with partners in the United Kingdom. So I think we got it covered.
Preparations have also been made at national level. There are some 117,000 British citizens registered as living in Germany. That's the third highest in the EU, behind France and Spain. So the German government has come up with this draft legislation designed to protect their rights in the event of a no-deal Brexit, which doesn't necessarily mean life's going to be quite the same as it was before. Back at the shop, Kittle's stockpiling whatever goods he can. After that, all he can do is wait and see what comes. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Hamburg.
Well, let's now get the latest on Brexit from the ground. We're joined by Ollie Barrett in London. Ollie, as usual, great to have you on the show. Now, since we've seen Prime Minister Johnson suspend a parliament, members of parliament, they've sought a judicial review through the courts in order to oppose this suspension. Some are even saying that there's still time to act next week, of course, when they return from recess. So, Ollie, where do the different cards lie right now?
Well, I think all sides believe they have some cards. It's very hard to predict, though, where those cards are going to lie in a week or so from now. In terms of the courts process, the legal challenges that are underway, it may well be that one of those succeeds in some way to disrupt Boris Johnson's plans. But I think the sense from lawmakers here in London at the moment is, who are opposed to a no-deal Brexit, that they are thinking less that the court route might be successful and more that they can perhaps have an impact in terms of putting legislation through Parliament in the coming week or so to try and force Boris Johnson in another direction. They are certainly going to try and do that when Parliament gets back next week. They have a limited time available to them. We also may well see a vote of no confidence in Boris Johnson's government, which would be designed to try and collapse his administration. Mr. Johnson, though, will also feel that he has some cards. He feels that he's got his opponents on the back foot. He also knows that his opponents are not united in what exactly they are planning to do and how they plan to achieve it. So Boris Johnson will know that if he can get through the next week or so unscathed, then he's in a reasonably strong position when it comes to trying to go to the European Union and therefore try and get a Brexit deal. But very hard to predict where all of this ends up in the next week or so, because we really are constitutionally in uncharted waters now.
Quite right. It's very hard to predict where it goes right now. But the EU actually has expressed some concern about the UK's democracy after that suspension of Parliament. What are the chances the EU is willing to play ball with Johnson right now? And given all this, does a no-deal Brexit seem more likely?
Yeah, and that expression of concern about British democracy has certainly raised some eyebrows among Brexiteers who have been talking about how they've believed that the European Union is undemocratic for many, many years. In terms of whether the European Union is prepared really to listen to Boris Johnson, certainly there are going to be intensified negotiations over the next couple of weeks, so we may get some progress in those. But if we don't, and if Boris Johnson remains in power, then he's insisted that he will take Britain towards a no-deal Brexit if he has to. He says he does want to achieve a deal and believes that a deal can be done with the European Union, but he says Britain must leave the EU on October the 31st. So we are certainly heading deep into the end game now, one way or the other.
Quite right. And the situation is definitely heating up. We actually hear that there will be widespread protests against Johnson expected on Saturday. What's the latest on that?
That's right. We're going to see a pretty big demonstration, I think, in London against Boris Johnson's Brexit plans. We will also see protests in several dozen other locations up and down the United Kingdom. Now, in terms of scale, these might not be as big as some of the biggest anti-Brexit, pro-EU protests that we've seen over the last couple of years, but they certainly will make a visual impact, at least. Whether they make any impact on the policy of Boris Johnson's government is far less likely. There have also been calls, by the way, from some quarters that perhaps if Boris Johnson continues down the path that he is treading, we should see some kind of national strike here in the UK. We're not at that kind of level yet, but that gives you a sense about the anger in some quarters. At the same time, Brexit supporters who have for years wanted Britain out of the European Union, they feel reasonably confident now that they have a Prime Minister who is backing them up fully in that issue, in that regard, and they are over the moon about the fact that he is now getting tough with Parliament and heading towards Brexit on October the 31st. So again, another illustration of how divisive the Brexit issue continues to be here in the UK.
Right. Well, we'll certainly be watching what happens. Many thanks for that update, Ollie. Of course, that was Ollie Barrett joining us there in London. Well, let's turn now to China's ongoing efforts to open its markets wider to foreign investment. The Shanghai municipal government on Friday announced a package of 50 preferential policies for its free trade zone. Now, the measures are intended to attract foreign investment and help the FTZ counteract the effects of the trade war between China and the US. Amongst the policies, Shanghai will invest at least $14 billion over the next 5 years to support startups, infrastructure and recruit skilled foreign workers. Now, the Lingang special area, a part of the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, will lower income taxes for some companies to 15% from 25% for 5 years. Other measures include easing restrictions on property purchases, cross-border capital flows and currency exchanges. And of course, staying in the country, China's Industry and Information Technology Ministry says that a number of new energy vehicles, including Teslas, will be exempt from the country's purchase taxes. Now, this is, as the government says, it's expanding a pilot program which involves parallel auto imports. The Ministry of Commerce and 6 other government agencies released a guideline concerning the program on Friday. The guideline states that authorized ports that import at least 1,000 autos annually can apply for the pilot program. Parallel imports allow independent auto dealers to directly purchase vehicles from a foreign production base or auto dealer. Now, prices for such cars are lower than those offered by authorized dealers. And new editions of China's renminbi currency were released into the market today, with 4 new banknotes from 50 yuan to 1 yuan in face value and 3 coins ranging from 1 yuan down to 1 jiao. Here's CGTN's Mi Jiayi, who's been checking out the cash.
Around lunchtime, banks across Shanghai started to unpack the new banknotes and pass them across the counter to their customers.
Here are two sets of the renminbi banknotes. This one from 2005 and the new one from this year. As you can see, the color of the new one is slightly brighter. There are 11 major design changes on the front of the new banknote and 6 on the back. And the major changes include the design of the number indicating the face value. For example, the number in the center has been changed to make the note harder to forge. When you tilt the banknote, you can see a bright reflective band going through the numbers. It doesn't just look fancy, it's also part of the security features.
In fact, there are 6 security features on the new banknotes. Others include a color-changing security thread on the right side of the bill, an offset printed see-through register on the number on the left side of the note, and a highlighted watermark on the portrait of Mao Zedong. These are the same security elements that featured in the design of the 100 yuan banknote that was first released 2 years ago.
There are several obvious changes to the new coins. For example, the 1 yuan coin is slightly smaller than the old version, and the design of the number has also been changed. For 5 Dao coins, the most apparent change is the color. As you can see, it's been changed from golden yellow to nickel white. That's because the metal used to make this coin has been changed from bronze-plated steel to nickel bond steel.
Now, you might be wondering where the new 5 yuan banknote is. Well, unfortunately, there isn't one. People just wasn't using them enough to justify printing a new edition. And by the way, the bank staff told us that the new 1 yuan note is not scheduled for release in Shanghai, as people here prefer to take their single yuan in coins rather than bills. The People's Bank of China says that for now, the new bills and coins will circulate in parallel with the old ones, with their value being just the same. Mi Jiayi, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And moving on now, Tesla founder Elon Musk's appearance at the World AI Conference in Shanghai has been seen as part of the company's move to boost its presence in one of the most important overseas markets. Now, as Chinese-made Teslas are supposed to roll out of its super factory in Shanghai this year, challenges are expected to arise for the fledgling smart car industry in China. CGTN's Yang Shengxi tells us more.
Every time Elon Musk visits China, it's big news for the car and tech industries. At this year's World AI Conference, he delved right into artificial intelligence with Alibaba's Jack Ma. While many of the discussions look towards the future, AI can be found in a wide range of today's industries, namely in the assisted driving function of his Tesla electric cars. China is one of the world's largest car markets. In recent years, new car brands in China are making electric vehicles that aim to rival Tesla. Without exception, they all claim they can improve user experiences with AI-enabled autonomous driving.
Even in a normal driving scenario, generate some great experience. But if you think about an autonomous scenario or semi-autonomous scenario, that will be amazing. Yeah?
China aims to be one of the most supportive places of new generation high-tech vehicles. The launch and operation of Tesla's wholly owned superfactory in Shanghai has gone more smoothly than many had expected. Subsidies for new energy cars, albeit much lower than previous years according to reports, have also supported these companies. Each have their own understandings of autonomous driving.
Should not put every resource on the vehicle. We should share the engineering resource, technical resource, and material cost from the vehicle to the road. For example, if we have a computing system, sensor system on the road, then this system can take care of thousands of cars pass through.
Experts say that will require motivation from local authorities in building smart infrastructures. Chinese brands Byton and Human Horizon both say they are cooperating with local governments in testing self-driving on roads. But the market will become more challenging for them as Tesla is now gaining a stronger presence in China than ever before, with its Shanghai factory planning to produce its Model 3 cars starting in the fourth quarter of this year. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Shanghai.
And shifting focus now, let's take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices giving back some of those recent gains, but of course they were still headed for the biggest weekly increase since early July. Now, of course, prices were boosted by a decline in U.S. stocks, as well as a looming hurricane in Florida. and an easing of that China-US trade rhetoric. Meanwhile, gold prices extending losses from the previous sessions, set to post its first weekly fall in 5 on those positive developments around the Sino-US trade negotiations, which of course have rekindled investors' appetite for riskier assets. Well, let's take a quick break now. Still to come on the show. The entrepreneur in Nigeria who's introduced a new flavor to the traditional akara and moi moi. Now, in Nigeria, bean pudding and bean cake is essentially enjoyed across all ethnic groups in the country, despite the difficulties involved in its preparation. Popularly referred to as akara and moi moi, it consists of peeled beans, crayfish, pepper, and other ingredients rich in protein. Now, a young entrepreneur has set on the task to modify the process for moi moi and akara lovers. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with her story.
Mixing things up at a part of a home which serves as a makeshift factory. Thereafter, the packaging begins. It's a final stage in the production process of Anthea Pereto's Moi Moi Espresso, and the label on the pack clearly indicates the various ingredients that she has mixed to form her product.
I love to cook, and I know that moi moi and akara are amazing health benefits. So, and also I thought also about the cumbersome process of preparing the moi moi and akara. You need to soak your beans for a couple of minutes, as much as 30 to 45 minutes, to now wash the beans, to dehusk it, and then go looking for a grinding machine, local grinding machine to mill. I now thought, no, I need to save you the stress. And that was how I birthed Moi Moi Espresso.
Anthea sold her smartphone and laptop to raise the seed capital to start her Moi Moi Espresso enterprise. And today, the product can be found on supermarket shelves across Nigeria. And because of her initiative, busy young men like Suleiman can now have their favorite meal without too much of a stress.
You know, for us bachelors, so we have to try to make ends meet to make sure that things are easy for us. So it's a way that we don't need to go to the grinding machine and do all those things. So someone has helped us to do this, and it's better for us.
Anthea's Moi Moi Espresso has significantly cut down the time it takes to make bean pudding and cake. What would normally take hours to prepare now takes minutes.
With Moi Moi Espresso, you can have your moi moi prepared in in fact, in 40 minutes, because all you do is just scoop, mix, cook, and that's it.
She came all the way to my house to show me how it's done, and since then, Moi Moi Espresso has been it.
Apart from her Moi Moi Espresso enterprise, Anthea also works as a radio presenter at one of Abuja's top radio stations. So when she's not in her makeshift factory here, you will sure find her behind the microphone.
Outside radio, I MC events, and then I also do voiceovers. Look, a little bit of this, a little bit of that puts food on the table.
But make no mistake, she has big dreams for her Moi Moi Espresso.
I wish and pray that Moi Moi Espresso will be a household brand. I also wish and see myself to be a major employer of labor, at least to take away the weight of hunger and depression from young Nigerians who are there crying, oh, no job, nothing to do, and all that, and might not even have money at all to start anything.
Anthea is more than passionate about her Moi Moi Espresso and hopes to find investors to expand and scale the enterprise. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, from a specialized nurse to a successful tomato farmer, that's the story of one Zambian woman who is trending after her unexpected career change. Once a cardiology nurse in Australia, Maria Zalumis quit her medical profession about 4 years ago to run her family's commercial farm. While today, Zalumis employs over 70 people, and she is regarded as one of Zambia's leading tomato farmers. With Zalumis' story, here's CGTN's Beryl Oro.
4 years ago, Maria Zalumis quit nursing in Australia to attend to her ailing father. Before returning home to Zambia, Zalumis practiced cardiology for nearly a decade. However, today, Zalumis is making waves as one of Zambia's leading tomato farmers.
It's a very busy life. Today I woke up at 5 a.m. We've been harvesting since 5:30 this morning. It's basically I've got no time for anything else but the farming. But it's my passion. It's something that I love to do. So I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as a way of life. So for me, this is what I love.
For nearly 6 months, Zalumis went by without an income, reason being she was apparently overqualified. However, one day she decided to have a go at running the family farm since her father was by then incapacitated. Since then, Zalumis has never looked back and doesn't regret the accidental career switch, saying farming is a labor that demands affection.
And I like to help the less privileged. I think that's one thing that really pushed me into farming was helping people who haven't been to school, giving them jobs, reducing poverty, and then, giving them a future.
When you're working, you need to make sure that you need to support the family. And as of that, Tunisian Farms has really helped me to get an income to help the family. Things are tough these days, but at least I've been able to help me in that one.
Now when we get paid, I pay school fees and my children can go to school. I keep paying every month and I have no problems.
Zambia is currently in the midst of a stressful drought, which has for the past years affected the country's farming season. According to official figures, around 2.5 million individuals in the country are at the moment facing food shortage. However, Tuzini farm, located 25 kilometers north of Lusaka, is thriving nonetheless. The farm produces a median of 72 tons of tomatoes in just a single month, as it looks to increase that figure in the coming years. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, before we go, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand firmer in its second day of gains, as of course China's latest move, which eased some of those trade war concerns, improved appetite for riskier assets. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira lowering a little today. It is expected to gain next week, following the end of loan repayments and dividend repatriation season, and also an expected improvement in dollar liquidity as, of course, the central bank auctions off some debt. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche, Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, have a great weekend.